I'm speaking to Patrick Allman Ward, who's the Chief Executive of Dana Gas, who's been with us at the World Assembly over the last couple of days. Patrick, thanks for coming.
My pleasure.
Dana Gas, a Middle Eastern company established in 2005, listed in Abu Dhabi. You're a natural gas specialist. You have assets in the Emirates, in Egypt, in Kurdistan. For those not familiar with the company, why don't you tell us what your rough footprint is and what kind of company you are?
So Dana Gas is actually the only publicly listed oil and gas company in the Emirates. As you say, we are quoted on the Abu Dhabi Stock Exchange with our headquarters in Sharjah. The company has currently got a market capitalization of about $1.2 billion with an asset value of about $1.6 billion. We're currently producing from our assets in Egypt and in Kurdistan about 64,000 barrels of oil a day equivalent. That's over the first 9-month period of this year. For the last quarter of this year, we actually increased that further to 68,000, and in the last few weeks we've actually increased that further to 70,000 barrels of oil a day equivalent. So that's about a sense of the scale. We are predominantly a gas producer, but we also extract condensates and LPGs out of our gas streams.
And you're a major investor in Kurdistan. It's a region that gets a lot of attention here in London, a lot of excitement, companies over here working there. What kind of investments, what kind of projects are you involved in that region?
Well, we're very proud about what we have achieved in Kurdistan. We are a member of the Pearl Petroleum Company with a 40% share. And Pearl has invested over $1.2 billion in Kurdistan to date. Now, that is the largest amount of money that any company has invested in Kurdistan up to now. And that money has been used to develop the Khor gas field. And the gas that's being supplied from the Khor gas field is going to 2 power stations, which has provided Kurdistan since 2007 with uninterrupted power supply. So we feel very proud of the fact that our efforts in Kurdistan have been the reason why there has been such good economic growth and such improvement in people's quality of life in the Kurdistan region. And for that reason, the company is actually extremely well regarded in Kurdistan by the Kurdish people.
There's a feeling, I think, at least in London, that a lot of the assets in Kurdistan are highly undervalued these days due to the political differences between the southern government and the Kurdistan Republic and regarding revenue sharing and export and the right to export it and the pipelines there. What's your take on that? Are we making progress, or are we sort of same place we were a couple of years ago?
I think the entire industry is actually at a deep discount at the moment. It was one of the highlights that came out of the first session this morning in the Oil Council was just how much both the international majors as well as the mid and small caps, to what extent they're discounted, and to that extent Dana Gas is not much different to others. So clearly, there is a discount factor that the market is applying on all commodity companies and oil and gas companies in particular. No doubt that in our particular case there's an additional discount placed based on the political risk or the perceived political risks associated with our businesses in Egypt and in Kurdistan. I think it's very clear from recent declarations that have been made by the authorities in Kurdistan that they have an intent to execute an export pipeline system for both gas as well as for oil. And clearly that means that they were going to have to resolve some differences of opinion with the federal authorities. I think those differences of opinion, frankly, are not insurmountable. They can be resolved. And I would expect, for the benefit of the entire people of Iraq, that this situation will get resolved in the relatively near future.
You mentioned Egypt. Let's talk about that. You have a sizable asset base there. Tell us what you have there and what you're doing.
Egypt's actually one of our 2 core assets. Dana Gas purchased the assets in 2007. And since purchasing the assets, we've actually had a very successful exploration campaign. We've drilled over 30 exploration wells with a 65% success rate. And we've actually doubled the reserves in Egypt over that time period. And associated with that, we've actually pretty well doubled production as well. So it's a great success story in terms of our assets and development of our assets. Clearly, Egypt as a country is going through some challenging times at the moment, and we're working together with the government as closely as we can to try and help them through the current liquidity problems that they face in order to be able to continue to grow production in the country.
It was going to be my next question. You're probably tired of hearing it from journalists, or at least in the West. When you talk about Egypt, it's hard not to talk about the political situation there. Is it business as usual? Is it a lot of companies, I think, very cavalierly answer that question and say, it hasn't impacted them at all. Is that true, or are there certain things you have to take into account?
The Arab Spring, which is, of course, the great political upheaval that took place across North Africa and the Middle East in the beginning of 2011, has impacted political life, and it's impacted also the economic situation in Egypt. As far as our own production operations are concerned, it has not actually impacted our ability. And in fact, despite the ongoing challenges that we face there, we've actually grown production by 30% from 2012 to 2013. So we're not impacted in a sense of interference with our operations, but certainly the challenges that the government faces as a result of the political changes with respect to balancing the economy and covering its deficit obligations. Clearly, that is having an impact on us.
And the final piece of your portfolio is in the Emirates, where you were founded in Sharjah. Why don't you talk about what you have there?
Well, we are actually own a gas field that straddles the border between the Ajman and the Sharjah Emirates. And that is not a particularly big gas field. It's just under 200 BCF in terms of size. But we've just taken and signed a contract actually for the construction of the offshore facilities, the structure and the topsides. And that actually took place last Sunday. So we're moving forwards with that project. We're very excited about it because it's going to supply gas, much needed gas, to the local markets and allow us to help in that way to increase people's quality of life and provide affordable sources of gas for the economy. We hope that we will be able to be bringing this gas field on stream in the beginning of 2015.
Patrick, you've just recently been appointed Chief Executive of Dana Gas. You've been in the region for a long time, at Mubadala before that. In your 30 years plus in this industry, in that region, how much have things changed, and what would you say? Is it possible to point to some of the greatest changes in that time?
I think some of the biggest changes that you notice is gas as a fuel source. I mean, quite clearly, over that period of time, gas has become a preferred fuel source, not just for the fact that it's a clean burning fuel, but because, of course, the major resource holders, the oil exporting countries and economies, want to keep their oil for export for generating income. So that has changed the focus from oil to gas as a preferred fuel source for power generation. Now, the economy has been actually so successful and has grown so much that the associated gas supplies, upon which many of these industries were originally based, has been absorbed. So additional sources of gas supply are actually required. And I think one of the exciting changes that I see taking place in the Middle East now is a gradual process of gas price liberalization. And in that process, there will be new stimulants and new reasons for independent companies like ourselves to set about exploration and production of domestic sources of non-associated gas.
What about expansion plans, Patrick? What kinds of JVs or projects would you consider, or are you considering now?
Well, we have, as Dana Gas, a growth ambition. And we actually have existing assets that we think will allow us to grow quite substantially into the future without necessarily having to expand our footprint at all. In Egypt, despite some of the challenges that we were discussing earlier, we've actually been successful in picking up a concession area, an exploration block in the offshore, which is on strike with the recent discoveries that have taken place in the Levant Basin. So we're very excited about that piece of acreage and the potential that it holds. So we are clearly very much looking at expanding our exploration opportunities, having carried out an inorganic growth acquisition through the purchasing of the assets in Dana Gas Egypt. I think our focus for attention going forwards is very likely to be rebalanced a bit more back towards organic growth rather than inorganic growth.
Patrick, thanks for stopping by.
My pleasure. Thanks, Drake.